So good evening. That's a warm response. I'm going to warm you up so that when the speaker gets here, you're going to be fired up and ready to hear him. Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, that felt so good. First of all, we want to welcome you to this, our 17th annual Poehler Lecture Series. You know, this is an event we all look forward to, whether we're coming as colleagues, students, family members, and friends. We look forward to this opportunity to hear another one of ours share how their faith connects, leads, or inspires their field of expertise. Tonight we'll be blessed to hear a unique approach to sharing one's story, one's philosophy, one's beliefs. We always like to give recognition and thanks to the initial contributors and sponsors of this event, the Poehler and Trimbach family. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here with us tonight. But we also want to thank the different colleges here at Concordia and the schools that we have here for helping to continue to support this event, as well as the Ann Hilmer Endowment. Without these sponsors and supporters, this program wouldn't continue. I want to give a special welcome to the Hanson family. We're glad to have you on campus at any time. And we know your dad, husband, father-in-law, whatever the relationship is going to be, so much more encouraged by your presence. So thanks for being here. And now I'll turn this program over to our Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Please help me welcome Paul Hilmer.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. I know it means a lot to Tom to have you here, and this has become really one of the highlights of the year in terms of our celebration of our identity here at Concordia University. With thanks for those who inspired this lecture, those who have supported it, and those who have spoken to us over these last 17 years, I invite you to join me in prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, in this season of Lent, we are reminded of your Son and the suffering he endured so that we would be reconciled to you. In this place dedicated to the cultivation of wise, faithful, compassionate servants, may we be ever mindful of both the cost and the power of Christ's redeeming work in our lives. And may we bring our faith and our intellect, both gracious gifts from you, to the task of serving you and loving our neighbors as ourselves. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce tonight's honored speaker. Professor Tom Hanson received his Bachelor's of Science degree in Business from the University of Minnesota in 1975, an MBA from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1981, and his Juris Doctorate from William Mitchell School of Law in 1987. He was in the ROTC in college and served in the United States Air Force from 1976 to 1982, achieving the rank of captain. Tom was a navigator on KC-135s, refueling other planes in midair. Tom has served a number of important roles, including Associate Dean of University Enrollment Management, Associate Dean of the School of Accelerated Learning, Dean of the College of Graduate and Continuing Studies, and Chair of the MBA program. In the words of longtime friend and colleague Jeff Burkhart, Tom is a dedicated servant leader, an outstanding teacher, mentor, and administrator who has been instrumental in advancing Concordia's programs. Former Vice President of Academic Affairs Robert DeWerff says, Tom faced the challenge of labels when he started working with adult learners who, when returning to school, were often labeled themselves as failures in securing their degrees in the normal way. Tom was one of a small group challenging these assumptions and calling on his colleagues to respect this new way of learning. Tom is a certified water safety instructor, scuba diver, and Strengths Finder coach, as well as a licensed private pilot. He has a wide variety of business experience. I have to say my wife and I still miss the Schlotzkys that he and Sarah used to run. He is a trained reconciler of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, a dedicated volunteer at his home congregation, and a mentor for high school students interested in law. My wife Janet and I have enjoyed many wonderful years of friendship with Tom and Sarah, and many hours of good food and lively conversation together on their lake or ours. We, along with the whole university, rejoice that Tom has weathered his recent health challenges with such faith and such courage. I close with one last quote from Jeff Burkhart. Tom is one of the most ethical people I know, always concerned about the Christian ethos in his dealings with his colleagues and with those whom he serves. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this year's Poehler Lecturer, Tom Hanson.
Thank you. Very kind words. I appreciate it. That was almost too good. I appreciate that. It's good to see familiar faces out here tonight and some that are new to me. So thank you for coming out on a Tuesday night. I appreciate that. This is one of the rare opportunities a person gets to try to tie together what they do for a living, to earn a living, and their faith life together. And at Concordia, we get to do that, and so I'm happy to do that. It's a great honor, and it's a bit daunting to stand here and look out and I see faculty colleagues, current faculty colleagues, I see former faculty colleagues who have retired, I see friends, family, everyone else, and my family doesn't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I get to. But I'm going to ask them to stand. I have my wife and my 5 sons and my daughter-in-law all up here in the front row tonight. So. My wife is a Concordia grad. Some of you know her from those days. My son Josh is a Concordia grad in what we called the CASAL program back then, the marketing program. My son Ben is a Concordia grad in the traditional communication department. He had that major. My son Zach, going down the line here, Zach was here at Concordia until he went in the United States Air Force. He followed in my footsteps a little bit there. My son Andrew is not yet a Concordia alum, but there's still hope. I'm holding out hope there. And my son Matt graduated just a few years ago, and just a couple weeks ago graduated from Mitchell Hamlin School of Law. They changed the name here recently. So it means a lot to me that they're here as well. The other thing I noticed when I was asked to do this, I went through the list of the previous presenters, and I went, oh, that's interesting. I know all those people. And I thought, how long will that go on? Because what a wonderful group of people it's been to work with here at Concordia. That's a privilege that I'm happy to have had. So, you saw what the title of this thing is, so we're gonna move right along on that. My purpose tonight, just to be clear, is not to offend anyone, or necessarily to change the political, legal, ethical, or religious viewpoints that any of us have, even though I'll share some of my own perspectives on those. My purpose really is to, I would say, shape and maybe refine some of our higher level critical thinking skills. As a lawyer, that's what we're trained to do. That's what I do in my classes, and look at some of the ways what's currently going on in our country is impacting the law and us as Christians, us as educators. So we like that we have a First Amendment that allows free speech. Also within our faith, we have the freedom of expression, but we do that while keeping relationships and language congruent with biblical teachings. So it's not that we're just free to do anything we want. Really, all of us probably learned a little bit about the First Amendment, the U.S. Constitution, maybe when we were very young, even in grade school or something like that, and I remember studying that then too. But it really wasn't until I was in law school and took the con law class that you study those cases and you realize how privileged we are in the United States to have something like the Bill of Rights, and especially the First Amendment above all. And then you look at other countries and places. I'll talk a little bit about travel and the things I've seen elsewhere, how unique and special that really is. And I really cherish that, and I learned that in law school. So I want to convey some of my feeling about how important that is for us to keep those rights as well as we can. So I'll talk a little bit tonight also about how sometimes labels can divide us. And it's easy to put labels on people. If I paint you with a negative label, then I can be offended at anything you say. And if I disagree with that, then you're something less than I am. If I'm offended, I can enlist the help of my group that feels the way I do, and we can try to do something to stop you, punish you. And I can even go after your reputation and livelihood. And I see that as kind of a problem that's occurring out there. One of the reasons why I picked this topic is it's so current. Every day we're seeing these things on TV, and oh my goodness, the last year has been crazy. So I want to look at how that impacts us, maybe then what can we do to avoid that personally and as a society. So in truth, my title of my talk is not exactly true. So I would say the concept of free speech isn't dead, but it maybe is on life support right now. And it's really up to all of us to try to keep that alive for the next generation. So I usually start out those of you that I've got a few students here, so those of you that have been a student in my class, especially my law class, know that I start usually out with this as a way of starting out the class, and that's treat people fairly, even generously, and with respect. And that'll keep you out of a lot of legal problems, as well as a number of other things. So if we can do that, we're going to be in good shape to start with. I'm going to start by talking about a label that maybe I felt when I was young and how that impacted me, and then we'll go into some other ones. So I got a personal example. I'll start with a story. I'm not going to do my whole life this way, but when I was 6 years old, I'm going to go through my entire life 1 year at a time. No, that's kidding. When I was 6 years old, I was sitting on my back patio with my dad. He had come home for lunch, and there was a workman there that was fixing some cement, and he was putting some 2x4s there where they were going to pour the cement. And we were sitting, and my dad said, "Hey, Tom, do you notice anything strange about that guy?" I looked at him, I went, "No, he looks like a regular guy." And he said, "Look, he's pounding with his left hand." I said, "Well, I'm left-handed, so is that strange?" He said, "Well, I don't know, let's ask him about it." My dad said, "He looks like he was about my dad's age." And so he said, "Noticed you're pounding with your left hand. How did that affect you when growing up?" And he said, "Well, when I was young and at home, when I put my fork or my spoon in my left hand, my parents slapped my hand and told me to put it down and do it the right way." Oh, okay. At least my mom and dad didn't do that to me. He said, then when I went to school, when I picked up the pencil in my left hand, my teacher said, slap my hand. I don't know if any of you have had this, but did they do the ruler on your hand if you did that? Maybe some of you. I went to public school. They did it there. I said, gee, because I was going to go to first grade in another month or two. So actually I was kind of scared about that. Thankfully, I can tell you I was not beaten in school in first grade, okay? I did make it through first grade without a beating. Seventh grade, I can't say that was necessarily true. We did have paddles on the walls in the classrooms in our public school. But it really wasn't my fault, okay? Back in first grade, I went to first grade, and thankfully, no harassment. And it was time to do a project. We had to use a scissors. So the teacher had said, I have left-handed scissors up here for you, for a left-hander. They have a little green handle on them. I don't know if they still do that or not. That was fine. The next day we had a cutting project. I went up. There were 2 other left-handers in my class. So I said, teacher, I don't have a scissors. And her response was, well, why don't you learn how to cut with your right hand? Okay. I wasn't very good at it, but I did learn how to do that. To this day, cutting with a scissors is one of the very few things I do with my right hand. I am totally left-handed. I also golf left-handed, but that's because I couldn't get a set of right-handed clubs. And my mom told me it was better anyway, you know, because you got a strong left arm. So those are the only 2 things I do. A couple of years ago for my birthday, my brother Mark gave me a book to read called Brains That Work a Little Differently, Discoveries About Common Brain Diversities by Bragdon and Gammon. It had chapters on ADHD, alcoholism, autism, dyslexia, seasonal affective disorder, and left-handedness. Here's just a couple things from the book. Okay. Over 90% of humans are right-handed. All right, I knew that. Yeah, okay. Lefties are on the losing end of right-handed appliances, backhanded compliments, insulting metaphors, culturally widespread prejudices, and countless old and tired jokes. Well, of course, I couldn't let that go, so here we have a little Jerry Seinfeld, who happens to be a left-handed comedian. There's a lot of them, by the way.
You ever feel that left is a negative? In the language, it's a negative thing. Leftovers, they're not very good. 2 left feet, left-handed compliment. On television, you ever see a crook named Righty? I've never seen that. Everything right, they make a positive thing. Right on, the Bill of Rights. You go to a party, there's nobody there. Where'd everybody go? They left.
Okay, a little levity there. Yeah, the computer worked perfectly in the rehearsal today, but it is locking up now. I'll let him work on that. I'm going to go on a little bit. Jerry Seinfeld locked up my computer. Okay, well, you know, even the Bible's a little tough on us left-handers. Matthew 25:33. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Ooh, ouch. Later in that same chapter. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Oh, shucks, you know, that isn't too good. In Israelite thought, the right hand was the favored one and symbolized privilege or strength. Well, I've been dealing with it. But you know, I'm old, so that stuff used to happen. That doesn't happen anymore. Just a couple weeks ago, my brother John was having lunch with me, and I noticed people are left-handed. I noticed the waitress was left-handed. So I said, "Oh, you're left-handed," and so am I. And then I said, "Is there anything that ever happened, you know, to you being a left-hander?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "What?" She said, "In grade school, when they were teaching us cursive, my teacher would take me and move my desk out into the hallway and tell me to stay there until we were done with the lesson because it would be too confusing for me. Then she would come out and tell me, 'Your letters are slanted the wrong way.' In the meantime, all my friends in other classes would come out and say, 'Oh, she must be in big trouble if she got to step outside.'" And I'm going like, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, that was in Lakeville School District just a couple years ago. So some of that stuff is still out there, and I point it out because you get a little sensitive to those kind of things. I will say that my wife gave me wonderful advice. She said, "Don't bring up anything left-handed in your talk." And I said, "That's a typical right-hander's response, right?" Okay. All right. And thank you to my IT assistant, Joel, here for getting that to work right for me. I got some others. I'm going to just skip those other statistics. Let's just say I'm glad to be alive as a left-hander because most of them don't even make it to my age, but a few do. How many lefties are there out there? We got 4. That's 5. That's pretty good, right? You're still kicking. All right, so I'll just finish that up by saying, for you students, I know there's some students here taking copious notes because I talked to you ahead of time. I don't know where you're sitting, yes. Would you please take the rest of your notes with your left hand for the rest of this, okay? And don't use your right hand at all, use your left. I notice none of you are left-handed, okay? Oh, that's right, those are right-handed desks that you have there, okay. Whatever. For the rest of you, I'm going to throw a challenge out to you. You can do this if you want. Just for fun, when you go home tonight, take your car key, put it in your left hand, and don't use the little button. Take it and put it in the lock on the car, open the door with your right hand, get in the car. Now put the key in, keeping it in your left hand, and then shift into gear with your left hand, okay? And then be sure and switch over to your right hand before you drive. I don't want anybody to get injured. I'm not going to be responsible for that. So just try it. I double dare you. Okay. So moving on from that story to a little bit more about labels and biases. You know, biases. I got all these definitions here that I don't need to read to this fine audience, but you know, a leaning inclination, a partiality, a bent. We have unconscious biases. Where we judge characteristics, real or imagined, a whole list of them here. For our psych profs, they all know this, and all you students that have had that. But some of these, I think, apply to the situation with free speech. So I'll take a couple of these. I picked out just some of them that I thought applied. One is a confirmation bias, the tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. Think for a minute about your favorite news sources over the last year or two. Do you have a TV station that you watch and you like better than the other ones? I mean, do you prefer CNN or Fox News better than the other one? Do you ever look at the other stations just to see what they're saying about the same events as the other one? Do you get your news on YouTube or Facebook? People are shaking their heads, no, come on, get with it. That's where everybody gets their news now, right? Or Twitter, maybe, I don't know. Essentialism, categorizing people and things according to their essential nature in spite of variations. Of course, we haven't heard any of this, right? Men are men, jerks. Women are women, emotionally fragile. You know, we got all these labels that we put on people. Well, if one woman is that way, then all must be that way, or all men. The just world hypothesis, you know, if it's just out there, so if bad things happen, it's really basically your fault. If good things happen, then it's because I earned them, right? I was down in Chile, just got back yesterday morning after a long trip down there for about 2.5 weeks. And one of the things that they presented in one of our business meetings down there was a poll that they had done in Chile, and they asked them about what were the reasons for people who were successful in life in Chile, and what were the reasons that people failed in life in Chile. Interestingly enough, the reason they gave, the vast majority said, if they're successful, it's because they got a good education, right? That makes good sense. If they weren't successful, it was for 2 reasons. One was they got a poor education, and 2, they're lazy. So if you're not successful, it's your own fault because you were lazy. But if you're successful, it's because, you know, you earned a good education. Some of these things come up. There's another one, a Semmelweis reflex, a tendency to reject new evidence that contradicts a paradigm. We all know about paradigms. That's one of the things where I think sometimes we get locked into a certain perspective in how we get our news and how we think about things, whether it's political or other, and we don't really want to hear an opposing view sometimes. And so that can lead to more labeling and other issues that way. Then we've got the Minnesota one, the Lake Wabagon effect, as it's known. We are all better than average here in Minnesota. You know, those other states, not so much. But here, we're all better than average. And us as individuals are better than average. It's those other people that have got problems. And finally, and I think this maybe is the most important one, and I'm going to go into this a little deeper with an author, Jonathan Haidt, in a little bit, but in-group bias and out-group bias. The tendency for people to give preferential treatment to others they perceive to be members of their own group. And out-group is individuals see members of their own group as being relatively more varied than people in other groups. So those other people, they're all the same, and usually they're bad. For us, we're all very different. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then there's all the other things, the biases we have, appearance biases and all those kinds of things. I found an interesting Bible verse, 1 Samuel 16:7, that I really wasn't familiar with. Don't judge people by outward appearance or height like other people do, but look at a person's thoughts and intentions. And when I was reading that, I thought, hey, that sounds a little bit like Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, I have a dream, and what did he wish for his kids? That they'd maybe be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And so an interesting concept there, how we all fall into this, we have the beautiful people, and then we give preference to that. Next, I want to talk a little bit about travel. My personal view is, and I've traveled a bit, is that one of the best ways to overcome these labels and biases you have is to experience how others live in the real world. And so you can see, I have up here this quote by Dave Ferry. But that isn't real, is it? Yes. Americans, right. Sorry. We've got a reputation abroad. I've learned that in different places. In fact, it brings back a memory. My son Ben and I did a study abroad trip several years ago. We were in the Louvre, and we heard a lot of noise we're in the lower level there, looking at wonderful Egyptian artwork. And I said to Ben, I'll bet you they're Americans. And he says, well, how do you know? I said, well, it's just a guess. And I said, I listened, I went, and I'm sorry I don't want to offend anybody. I said, I'll bet they're Texans. So I said, well, now we got to go check it out. So we went and found them. Certainly, they were all, it was a group of Texans down there. But I saw that in Chile when I was just down there a few days ago, too, that most people in other places where I go, they're a little more quiet, but Americans were a little more boisterous out there sometimes. And so that's that image that we have out in the world. One of the things I think that Concordia has done to try to help with some of that labeling and sensitivity is just this last year, we did a cultural sensitivity survey, and then we met as faculty and staff and went over some of that as a way to try to help us understand where are our gaps, where are our biases, do we know what they are, and so I thought that was a really cool step as well. But when you travel abroad and get immersed with people, I think that's kind of that first-hand experience. Can't really be beat. So, James Michener also said, when you visit places, if you reject the food, ignore the customs, fear the religion, and avoid people, you might just stay home then. You just wasted your money. And those who have traveled with me know that keeping a positive and inquisitive attitude is critical in traveling and learning. And so with my son Matt and my wife Sarah, we just returned from Chile, as I mentioned. And I see in the front row here, I have Reed, who was down there in Chile with me a couple years ago. He knows those things as well. So I really think that's part of it, because travel is difficult sometimes. And keeping that attitude is really important. And Margaret Mead, I think, said it well here. As a traveler who has once been from home is wiser than he who has never left his own doorstep, so a knowledge of one other culture should sharpen our ability to scrutinize more steadily, to appreciate more lovingly our own. And that's one of the questions I've gotten to ask myself when I return from a trip, no matter where I go. How do I see myself differently? How do I see my home or my hometown differently than I did before I traveled? And just as an example of that, when I don't see Steve, but Steve Manderscheid and I led a trip to China a few years back, and we had a free evening, so he and I decided to go up. In Shanghai, they have a lot of buildings, but there's one that's the tallest, so we went up in the top floor of the tallest building at night. It was just absolutely gorgeous, unbelievably. We looked in every direction, and all we saw was high-rises, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. And we were looking down at a building way down below us, and then I was counting, and I realized that building down there was the same height as the IDS Center in Minneapolis. And I'm saying there's literally hundreds and thousands of buildings that height or higher there. And then I remember as we flew back in to Minnesota and we were landing, we flew past Minneapolis. And I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota. If you wanted to, if you were going big time, you came up to the SIDS, the cities, the Twin Cities. That's where all the action was. And I looked down and I just went, wow, Minneapolis is tiny. And here I thought it was huge. And you just realize it's different than we think it is. So that's one of the takeaways. So I hope that happens to you as you look and you come back and then you see things differently from an outside view, different lens. And you maybe can see the strengths and weaknesses. As I said, I got back from Chile yesterday. Something had happened in Chile yesterday. It was on the news probably, maybe. Well, they got a new president. And he's the new president and he's replacing the old president, who was the president that replaced him before when he was president, and then he replaced that president before that. Do you know that? They've had two people be presidents, but they only get one term. This one, that one. Down there they call it center left and center right. So they've had 4 people as their last 4 presidents, and when we were down there we saw increased security all around us. The hotel we got sent to when our flight was canceled had armed people all around it as dignitaries were coming in. So you see the Chilean view of what's happening. One thing that's different, we have 2 parties here. They have about 7 parties there, but the center left, center right, and then they have the outside parties who are pulling them further apart. Something that we see a little trend of here as well. I'll just finish this travel section up. I got a couple quotes here. Susan Heller, when preparing to travel, lay out all your clothes and all your money, then take half the clothes and twice the money. You've heard this one before. We agree with that. Yes, that worked. That would have worked way better for us. I brought a large bag with me that it's half full and it's almost overweight now. So we're going to have a bag burning party, I think, tomorrow, and I'm never going to take that thing and lug that thing around again. Regina Nadelson said, most travel is best of all in the anticipation or the remembering. The reality has more to do with losing your luggage. We didn't lose our luggage, but I would add lugging your luggage and missing your flights would be something that it is not as much fun as remembering the other good parts of that. Okay, so moving on then from the travel, talk a little bit about critical thinking. That's one of the things we focus on in the law classes, and I think it's one of the things that would help us in avoiding some of the labeling that we see going on out there in the current political topics especially, but also it applies to all different parts of life. You know, we use various rubrics and we work on that, and that's something we measure in the law classes. And of course, we do that all properly because we're up for reaccreditation here next month. So of course, all our ducks are lined up in a row, right? Yeah, we've all got it all set. So that's really an important thing to do. And one of the ways that I use in the law class is to talk about this. Does anybody recognize that? You know what that figure is. It's pretty famous, right? Those are the scales of justice. Okay, it's audience participation time now. And there's somebody and they're holding them up high. What does the person have on their eyes? A blindfold. Why is the blindfold on? Does anybody know? Justice is blind. What is justice blind to? Well, it's blind to some of the things that we call isms or labels, right? So should it matter when you go before the judge whether you're female or male? Whether you're 30 years old or 40 years old? Right? What your skin color was? What your national origin was? No, the justice should be blind to those factors, and sometimes those things get put on the scales. So since I'm super old, I remember as a little kid going to the butcher shop when they had actual scales, and you said, I want 2 pounds of hamburger, and they took little weights. Anybody else remember that? They took the weight, okay, 2 pounds, they put 2 1-pound weights on one side of the scale, and then they started putting hamburger on until the scale balanced, and then they wrapped up the hamburger. Well, that's the same basic idea of higher level critical thinking skills, only in the legal sense. What you're doing is you're saying what evidence goes on those scales, what facts, and which side do the scale does it go on? Does this help the defendant or the plaintiff? And how big should it be a 1-pound weight or a 5-pound weight? How important is it? And then probably just as important, what weight does not go on that scale? What should we not be looking at? What should we not be using? Well, the person's really good looking. Well, okay, I'm going to put more weight. No, we shouldn't use that. We also want to make sure it's a fair scale, right? In the old days, you used to have to watch out for this. Somebody put their finger on the scale. Oh yeah, that's 2 pounds, and then you get it home. Hey, that was only 1.5 pounds. So we want to keep that. We want to keep that neat and clean in the justice system. So if you think of these problems, if you think of political discussions that we're having right now in the nation, and yeah, in my law class, what could go wrong? Immigration, discrimination, sexual harassment. Those are all topics we talk about. They're all in the news all over the place right now. So you look at that and go like, how should we do this? How should we weigh that out? And we have to be open to both sides of an argument. In fact, sometimes I use in a class exercise where I'll pick a controversial topic and I'll say, well, how many are really, well, I'll pick one here. How many are pro-dreamer? Anybody who's a dreamer should be in automatically. Okay, some people raise their hands. How many think, no, you should go through the regular channels and you should follow the laws and the rule of law? Okay, some people think that way. And I say, okay, now switch. Now you're going to come up with what the best argument for the other side of that case would be. Oh, wait a minute, I don't believe in that. Well, yeah, you're going to have to figure that out then, because I got another panel, and these are the ones that they don't care one way or another. They're your judges. And I'm going to give you points based on how well you do. So that usually kind of wakes us up. What? I have to know the other side of the argument? But I believe strongly it's this. Okay, well, what does the other side believe? And why? What's their strongest argument? And if they can't see the other side's arguments, it's not a good thing. So anyway, I thought tonight we'll do this. Maybe we can pick something easy, like let's pick abortion, or what other things should we pick? And we're going to get everybody together, or maybe not. Maybe not. Let me rethink that for a second. Okay, yeah, no, we'll skip that part. All right. Moving on. All right, one of the other things I wanted to refer to, and it's when we label people, we assume that all people with a certain characteristic are the same. And I'm a Strength Finders certified person. I do training with that. Joel and I just did one down in Mankato for a large company, 100 and some employees, just a couple weeks ago. Joe Kavanaugh, you see here, that's his book he wrote, The Language of Blessing. He takes and looks at it from a Christian perspective. And here's one of the things he uses from his book to help people move from a place where they have a false identity forward in their life. And you can see just quickly those steps. Lack of self-awareness leads to minimizing, leads to projecting, leads to unfounded expectations, leads to judging, and finally to labeling. And so sometimes when we have a little lack of self-awareness, it's easier to judge other people and label them. But we want to move to this cycle of authentic identity, being self-aware, being filled with gratitude, humility, authenticity, love, offering your gift. Don't you wish every politician in Congress and every elected official in the state would move to this cycle of authentic identity, and maybe things would be a little better? Strength domains is, we're not going to go into it in great detail. Don't worry about reading this. The bottom one's EIRT. These 34 strengths they found, no matter what your culture or background, these are things that we have as individuals, and they're unique to us, very unique. The general categories are executing, getting things done, influencing other people, building relationships with others, or strategic thinking. Those are the four main areas, and the others fall kind of within that. The thing that's to me is very interesting is, this is mathematics. I'm trying to look and see where our math folks are tonight, but the top 5 in any order is about 1 in 275,000 people. So it's highly unlikely anyone else in this room would have your set of strengths that you bring to your family, your workplace, than anybody else here. The top 5 in order, 1 in every 33 million have that. And if you had all 34 talents, it would be, the chances of that happening would be less than all the grains of sand on the earth. Does that kind of freak you out? Boom. So we're all created uniquely by God ahead of time for what we're to do with our strengths. The talents and strengths that God has given us is what we should be using. So to me, that kind of says, wait a minute, I don't have to be like everybody else, and I don't really want people labeling me. I'm going to be the best I can be with the strengths that God has given me. Okay, so then here we have it. There's the First Amendment. Some of you know this well and can recite it from memory, some can't, but there's a lot in this one. We could probably do a whole series of lectures on each one of those subparts: freedom of religion, establishment, protecting exercise, peaceably assemble. All of this stuff has been in the news. So it is very current still, isn't it? I hope we can agree that in the United States we got something special with this First Amendment. And it's amazing sometimes to me that they got these things pulled together and they got them voted on, and you can see it was ratified not in 1776, was it? No, that's what we always celebrate. July 4th, it's a good day in my opinion. But this happened on December 15th in 1791. So it took them a while to come up with these founding documents, but that one especially I think is one that is really essential for any society that's going to do that. I was coming back from Chile, and I read in the paper that in China, just this week, they decided to change their constitution. Did any of you see that? Yeah, and they made it so now their president doesn't serve for a term. He's president for life now in China. But I'm sure that free speech is okay, and so if you don't like that, you can feel free to speak your mind there, right, about that? So that's just one example. It's not just China, though. That's true really the world over. They don't enjoy the protections we do. That's one thing when you travel abroad, you learn, like, we don't have the same laws in this place as we do at home, so behave yourselves, right? Okay, that one of the problems I see with this, though, is the First Amendment protects us against what? The federal government making any laws, right? But for you old-timers, the times, they are a-changin'. And now we have other things going on. So we've actually got states now that are coming up with laws that can limit free speech. They've got some in Massachusetts, New York, the last couple of years that have come up where there's penalties. If you disagree with what their law is, you can be fined. Some I've heard, I haven't researched this, but up to $250,000. The thing that I think is even more important than that is the loss of privacy. I'm just going to say this. It's not originally mentioned, people say, it's constitutional, right? Yeah, it's not exactly in there that way. But the courts have interpreted it that the Constitution does protect the right of privacy. But let me just say this. There's no privacy. There's no privacy left. Hello? There's no privacy anymore. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean it's gone? I do continuing legal education because I'm licensed as an attorney. We have to earn so many credits every 3 years. And I went to one a couple years ago. It was a very interesting one. What happened was the speaker, who was not a lawyer, usually there's lawyers doing this, the speaker who was not a lawyer was an IT guru, you know, like Joel over here who was fixing my PowerPoint. And he said he gets called by judges and lawyers when they want to find out some information that's been recorded somewhere. And so he says, yeah, people, if they get in trouble, you know, and they think they're going to have a problem, what do? They try to destroy the evidence, right? So you can buy those. What do? You erase your hard drive, right? He said, I can get that. And so he said, what about if it's one of those really good, you know, you erase it 10 times? He said, I can get that. They go, what about the military wipe? He said, given time, I can get that. And they said, oh yeah, well what about if I take my laptop and I burn it? That's hard, but I can get that. Then he said, well, what if I throw it in the ocean and it sits there for 6 months? I can get that. And of course, everybody in the room's getting a little bit nervous, and a couple of them are saying, so like if not me, but if somebody I know wanted to get something off my computer, that, you know, that search I did last week, how do I do that? And he said, that's interesting. Every time I do this talk, somebody asks me that question. And he said, the last guy that asked me, I told him I wouldn't tell him, but I would send him an email with the solution. And so he sent him an email, and he said, find an Army tank, and then drive over your laptop 4 or 5 times, and that'll probably do it. And then somebody says, well, how about a more realistic example? And he said, you know, anything you have, you need to take a drill, an electric drill, and you just need to drill holes all the way through everything. He said, if you do that, I probably can't get it. But he's the guy they call. So some of you remember the Tom Petter's case here from Minnesota. He got called in on that, several other ones where nobody else can get the data. He can get the data. So there's no privacy on that. What about your phone? Yeah, then he told us about phones. Yeah, here's his thing. Don't ever buy an Apple iPhone because it uploads your data and then it's available. That was just his advice. My daughter-in-law's giving me the evil eye. Get rid of that iPhone. But we don't have to worry about emails, do we? Because those, once I delete that, it's gone. Right, Eric? No, they keep them there. That's oh, shoot, you know. Doggone it, we don't have that anymore? Well, you know, we've got other things now, too. We've got Siri that helps us out, right? How about Amazon Alexa? Anybody? How many of you have that at home? Anybody got that? Siri, you got one of those things going on? Okay, you realize that is always listening to everything in the house. It has to be for you to call out its name and it to recognize it, right? So anybody that can hack into that, what's hackable, by the way? I have the answer. Everything is hackable. They can hack anything you have. If you've got one of those, what's the home temperature setting things called that, what is it? Yeah, Nest. That's really wonderful. From your phone, you can tell it to, you know, heat the house up a little bit, I'm coming home. Is that hackable? Yeah, it's hackable. Okay. I have a washing machine that connects up to the internet. Really? Do I really need that? It's hackable. Gee, then they know when you're home or when you're not home. Some of you may have seen this. I don't, if you have, they're I don't know, it's got millions of views. Did you see the one where they had the guy's a comedian, and it was a YouTube video that I saw, but he's got Alexa, and he's sitting there, and he decides to ask it some questions to find out what the truth is. And so it's kind of funny, but so he asks, Alexa, who was Jesus Christ? And the answer is, Jesus Christ was a mythical character from 2,000 years ago. A mythical character, okay. Well, we know that's not true, right? And then he asks, well, Alexa, who was Mohammed? Mohammed was a wise person that lived in the 600s, you know. And then they asked several other questions. But it became a sensation, millions of views, and then Amazon said somebody, like maybe 1 million people, sent them emails saying, hey, you know, maybe you should think about what your Alexa is telling. If you have, you know, too much time on your hands sometime, go on YouTube and just type that in, and you can hear some of the things. The troubling thing for me is there's a lot of people that's where they get their information. Do you get your information from Wikipedia now? No? Think one person no, everybody else yes, okay. Google, what do? I Google it. Google's always going to tell me the truth. They're going to give me the honest answer, right? Did you know that Google gets 12 million requests a year to take down sites, and it takes down about 40% of those? Well, how do they decide what to do for that? Facebook and it says, the article said that millennials get their news from Facebook. I don't know. I'm not a millennial. I know it's a surprise, but it says that an average millennial, my son Matt really appreciates it when I pick on millennials because he is one, but it says they spend 45 minutes a day on Facebook, and there are 1 million requests per day to take things down that people don't like what they see on Facebook. YouTube now has a thing where if somebody complains about your YouTube video, they will demonetize you. Have you heard that term going on? Demonetize. In other words, they won't list you in the recommendations even if you're getting a lot of hits. They won't pay you for advertising revenue that they get. So I don't know, that seems a little scary. So in other words, there's no privacy, and corporations, rather than the government, are what is really controlling the market square, where we celebrated 500 years of Martin Luther. What did he do? Do you remember anybody? He nailed something on that door over there. Where's Renata? I think she was just over there at that door in Germany. And that was a public square for discussion. You nailed things on the door. It sounds crazy now, but it'd be like putting a poster up for something to discuss. Well, now the corporations control that. There is no public square. The public square is Google. And so the First Amendment does not protect you for free speech. That's only for the government. So the corporations, which now have gotten so huge, are the ones that control a lot of that media. There was a video panel discussion sponsored by Phi Beta Kappa, free speech through a new lens, and just the very short squib about what they talk about. The screen is the new public square. Almost all media is now controlled by 6 or 7 conglomerates. The nature of the press has broadened, so now YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are seen as part of the press. It's not just newspapers and TV anymore. And what does this mean? What does this mean? Corporations, including media conglomerates, now have as much, and I'll throw this out there, I'm willing to discuss it, as much or maybe more control over speech than the government does right now, because we use all these common platforms. And there are basically no rules that forbid them from prohibiting your speech if it's just something they don't like. So that, to me, is scary. That, to me, is maybe the biggest threat. The lack of privacy and then the control by corporations over what we see, what we hear, and how we hear it. Okay, now I'm going to get into the fun stuff. Isms, right? So let's talk about sexism, sexist, racism, racist, fascism, fascist, slurs, hate speech, and all of that stuff, right? Yeah. What is hate speech? Who decides what's hate speech and what isn't? Now you can see things on the media where they say, well, that's hate speech. Oh, everybody's kind of saying anything they don't agree with might be hate speech. I guess that's to be determined, isn't it? I hope we aren't people that are doing hate speech, but it's a little concerning to me that it's not well defined and it's determined by what you think. Now I'm going to show you a political video that I was sure that half of the group will be upset with me about, and then I'll go with the other half, and then I'll get the other half of you with my next comments following that. All right, so you can guess what this one is. So this is the previous election. You can see this is Hillary Clinton, candidate for the Democratic Party. She's standing in front of her podium with her Stronger Together. So Stronger Together was what they were trying to do there. And so we'll listen to just 1 minute of this, and then we'll give at least a little equal time to the Donald Trump stuff, although I'll get to that later. Okay, so we'll see if our guys up in the upstairs are going.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that. And he has lifted them up. He has given voice to their websites that used to only have 11,000 people, now have 11 million. He tweets and retweets. They're offensive, hateful, mean-spirited rhetoric. Now some of those folks, they are irredeemable, but thankfully they are not America. But the other basket,
Okay. So, that was probably not her finest hour. There's lots of reasons. I don't know. I always write down on a little sheet of paper before every presidential election who I think is going to win and how many percentage points they're going to win by. So I'm no genius. I had her winning by 14 percentage points. I thought it was a shoo-in. She had everything going for it. I think anybody here that can claim, well, I knew Trump was going to win all along. No, everybody thought that was going to happen. Well, what happened? Well, there's been a lot of discussion the last year. Well, maybe it was the email thing, or it was this, or it was that. I'm using this as an example because, and I'm not going to show a Trump thing right now, but Trump, did he use nice, wonderful language and everything else during the thing? No, absolutely not. It was horrible. He called her Crooked Hillary, right? Remember that? Crooked Hillary. Every time, it's like Hillary was her last name and Crooked was her first name, right? I see a little bit of difference here because he was calling her that, but she was calling, if you do the math on it, almost 100 million people deplorable and irredeemable. The irredeemable, this is just me speaking for myself. I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins and everyone else, and I don't think anybody is so sinful that they're irredeemable. So that particular part bothered me. It didn't change how I voted in the election or that type of thing, but I think that was a mistake of her doing that, because what it did is it alienated all those people. And then if you were thinking about voting for Trump, well, am I in the half that she thinks is deplorable and irredeemable, or am I in the other half that's just, I lost my job and I want a better life? I think that was a key. That's just my view. There's lots of other views. Do you think there are any Donald Trump videos that would make him look just as bad or worse than that? I'm guessing there are thousands of those, and I was going like, okay, I got too many to pick from. So I wanted to make it equal, but I couldn't find any that were directly would directly go against that particular one. But just so you know, I'm not excusing anything he did or anything else. And so in this presentation, there's very few people here today. In fact, maybe just my family members and one or two others that know my thoughts on those things. But I was very troubled by that election, and no matter who won, I was not as hopeful as I wanted to be. Let's just put it that way. And I stopped, and then because I was just talking with somebody, well, I voted for the least worst person. Yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah, I've done that before too. But it was really hard as a professor of ethics, applied ethics, for me to figure out how I was going to handle that. All right. Now that we got that part out of the way, I've offended basically everybody. Let's go on to something else more fun. Hey, how about gender discrimination? Oh, there we go. Well, gender was binary, and now it's what? There's over 70 gender choices on some places that you. Although I will say immigration, you just have two, male or female. Since we had to go through that, we didn't have all those other choices there. But it's changing out there. So that used to be one or the other. Now we've got all these choices. Okay, let's bring it up. Sexual harassment. Has that been in the news at all lately? Yep, it has. Vice President Joe Biden came out, and there was a lot of videos about him, but then he came out and said, well, the woman's always right. The woman's always right. The woman's always right. And I think I'm very happy that some of these things have been uncovered and these things are coming out. I wish they would have come out many years ago when it's basically it's a power trip thing. And it's almost all men doing it. Let's just acknowledge that. And it's about time some of those things get fixed. But it's not always one thing or the other. So that part, as a lawyer, it bothers me a little bit. Ooh, the burden of proof now became, if you're accused as a male, it's the woman's always right, so no matter what evidence there is, that's how it works. I would like to think that we enjoy this, we're innocent until proven guilty, but that is something that's unique here in the United States as well. Other places don't have that in criminal law. So the burden of proof in law is huge, 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 humongous. And it's especially humongous in that situation where there's something between two parties, nobody else, there are no witnesses, nobody else knows who's actually telling the truth or not. And so there's been a lot of stuff on there. I'm not going to go through all of that, but we got to watch ourselves a little bit on that and do some higher level critical thinking skills here and ask, what is the proof? How good is the proof? What's the quality of the evidence? Is there anything else besides one piece of evidence that would help that? One of the risks I see going forward is in the workplace, for some men, they're going to go like, I don't want to work with a woman. I don't want to be falsely accused. And so there's, the Wall Street Journal, they looked at that just last week about how some of that pushback may end up being harmful if it goes too far. Throw in race here. Let's I'm trying to get them all out for you. Well, race was a continuum, and now it's binary. Now it's white or person of color. There's all kinds of things going on out there. I've got a video that I want to pull up next. Yeah, there you go. It has locked up on me. Everything worked perfectly this afternoon, tonight. It's great, I got my tech guy at my arm at all times. And I've got witnesses up there that everything worked perfectly just a short time ago. We got to restart. This will just take a minute. You can't even restart it? Control-Alt-Delete. Yeah. Okay, while he's doing that, this is the risk you have. Have any of you done any of those ancestry things? Use Ancestry.com or 23andMe. Anybody done that? Just a couple. Yeah, I did it. It's kind of fun. get to see a little bit about yourself. You know, I know some of my ancestry, but who knows all that? And they trace it all the way back through, and they got arrows pointing all over the world. And I found out that I'm African, Middle Eastern, European, and Neanderthal. So, and if that wasn't bad enough, it told me that, yeah, I see the guys in the back row laughing hard, go like, we knew it, we knew that was true. So, and not only am I Neanderthal, but then they've got a comment that says, you're more Neanderthal than most people are. So, okay, that explains a lot. All right. Yeah. Sorry, kids. You know, maybe your mom's side is a little better on that one. He's still working. Okay. So Ancestry.com is another one that's just like that. And it is kind of interesting. I found a couple cousins that I didn't know I had, long last, like second cousins and things like that. And you can compare that then, like with your own kids. It does say that there's a risk. It gives you a thing that there's a risk. My son Josh did this before, and you know, there's a risk. You could find out things you don't want to learn about yourself, right? Like, sorry, I know you thought I was your dad, but no, he is my son. That was confirmed. We got that down. But so there are those kinds of things. You find out that maybe things weren't always what your ancestors told you on that. But this video, if I can ever get this little video to run. Oh, great! They're swapping out computers now. I'm going to show you something. It's a project that Ancestry.com did with some people. They had them. They said they interviewed them, and they're from a variety of backgrounds and places. And I'll see if I can get it to go now. And they brought them in, and then they said, do you want to spit in the tube and find out what your DNA says about it? So this is, you can tell here, it's up on Facebook. So it's going to launch that. Oh, boy.
The traditional Kurdish cloth.
We're just proud black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well, or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit.
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that's like, that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government.
But French?
Nah.
We're just best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad, so 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. You spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
Right, the story of you is in that tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali.
Solid Iraqi.
I'm Cuban.
You're going to tell me that I'm English, like I've told you.
Jay, can you come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you ready to find out your results? Will you read it out to us, please?
Wow, look at me.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. Shit, I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa! No.
Caucasus, which was Turkish.
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What? Great Britain, 30%. Can we 5% German?
I'm Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm a Muslim Jew.
Great Britain 11%. Are you sure these results are mine?
Eastern Europe?
Iceland has definitely moved closer to Europe now.
I'm gonna go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. There would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins, in a broad sense. In a much more direct sense. You have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. Wash?
Yeah. What's that?
Why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
I didn't know I did. This is like, my heart's pounding right now. I swear to God. I'm Jay from everywhere, but whatever it is. I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
So would you like to travel to all of these places?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of cool, and it gives us a different perspective. That one, where is it? Somewhere it was. I think it's been seen by 33 million people. So sometimes we think we're so much different than others, but maybe not. When I was in Chile, I asked one of our people that we were staying with in their house. I said, well, what's your ancestry? And I said, is it because it's Native American and a lot of Spanish in that particular area, some German? And she said, mestizo. You know, that's all Chileans. They don't worry about that. Everybody's got what we sometimes say mixed blood, and so they don't think about that maybe as much as some of the rest of us do. Okay. We're going to finish up here. I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit about a book that came out. It's called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. I'll just take you briefly through that, and then we'll get closer to the end here. So Jonathan Haidt is the professor. I don't know if you've seen him. He's done TED Talks. There's several YouTube videos about him. He and others went through and did a lot of surveys, and they were looking for the moral foundations people based their political and religious beliefs on, and they'd see if they could find some common characteristics for that. And so they came up with 5 different areas of that, and the first one is called care/harm. And so this is a moral foundation that people have. You care, you don't like to see other people harmed. And so this is one that really probably is, everyone has some of that in them. But it's not whether you have some, it's whether that is kind of your go-to foundation. That one, I was going to say trumps. That one, overcomes the other ones. So care and harm, they say, and by the way, the author of this book, just for full disclosure, he's self-described as a leftist atheist. So when he comes at some of this stuff, he's not talking about Christianity. He's saying that, evolution came up with these. But despite that, there's something here, and I'm not sure how much it is. I don't go for everything he says, but I just thought that was interesting. So the way it informs the degree is whether it's higher or lower, as we said. This is a core impact one. Fairness, versus cheating. People feel pressure, liking, friendship. When people show signs they can be trusted to reciprocate. And these are his words about left and right. So not mine, but his. For those on the political left, concerns about equality and social justice. And they would say wealthy and powerful groups are accused of gaining by exploiting those at the bottom while not paying their fair share of the tax burden. That's the fairness cheating viewpoint of those that would be on the left. For those on the right, they would say, well, Democrats as socialists are people that take money from hardworking Americans and give it to lazy people, those who receive welfare or unemployment benefits, and to illegal immigrants in the form of free health care and education. For left, the fairness piece implies equality, and those on the right would say it implies proportionality. So people should be rewarded in proportion to what they contribute, even if it doesn't mean exactly equal outcomes. And that's being discussed out there right now in several areas. Loyalty, betrayal. The objects of loyalty for boys appear to be teams and coalitions in contrast to two-person relationships for girls, they found. The love of loyal teammates is matched by a corresponding hatred of traitors, who are usually considered to be far worse than enemies. Dante in the Inferno reserves the innermost circle of hell for the crime of treachery. The left tends towards universalism and away from nationalism and is often hostile to American foreign policy. Donald Trump, if you remember, Donald Trump was a liberal Democrat and Hillary supporter until he switched and ran as a Republican. Okay, so that might explain, to me there's a lot of things that explain, that might explain part of why some of those people would say, well, wait a minute, he donated to Hillary, he was her friend, and now he's running against her and saying bad things. Yeah, loyalty, betrayal, right there. Authority and subversion. Cultures vary enormously in the degree to which they demand that respect be shown to parents, teachers, others in persons in authority. And so, like I say, this guy, he's a liberal himself, but he would say the common liberal belief is that hierarchy equals power, equals exploitation, equals evil. The current triggers for this is anything that's construed as an act of obedience versus disobedience, crossing borders, respect versus disrespect, kneel for the national anthem, even while in England, and submission or rebellion, he's not my president, with regard to authorities perceived to be legitimate. Current triggers also include acts that are seen to subvert traditions, institutions, or values that are perceived to provide stability. This goes back to some of that I was talking about a little earlier. Sanctity and degradation, two competing human motives. On the left, we'd have neophilia, where attraction to new things, all of that kind of thing, neophobia, a fear of new things. I've told you I love to travel. Not everybody loves to travel. Some people really don't like to travel, but I do. Does that mean I'm left or right? Perhaps. I don't know. We're throwing out all these, are you progressive, liberal? He uses conservative, liberal, but we know there's variations on all of those. I'll just stick with his stuff for now. He says that for sanctity and degradations, the right would say sanctity of life, sanctity of marriage, the body as a temple housing a soul rather than as playground used for fun. The left would say the virtue of chastity is usually dismissed and outdated as sexist. This is his view. I don't agree with this, but devout Christians are often lampooned by secular liberals as uptight, pleasure-fearing prudes, according to Haidt. But sometimes the religious left buys products to cleanse themselves of toxins. Some environmentalists see industrialism and capitalism as degradation of nature. And this are his words again, for biomedical issues, the left might ask, at what point can a fetus feel pain and doctor-assisted suicide becomes an obviously good thing as it ends pain? Just as a question when we think about those issues, how do we reconcile left and right positions on death penalty and other life positions? It's just topic for another day. So sacred, it helps bind individuals into moral communities, but it also can separate people too. On the right side, the right reveres objects, flags, crosses, places, battlefields, people, saints, heroes. When someone desecrates something sacred, the reaction is swift, emotional, collective, and punitive. And think about how the kneeling for the national anthem played out this last fall. This stuff kind of fits some of what we see going on. They did all of this. They got 500,000 people to do these. They came up with this, and they said, oh, something's still not right. So they went back and looked at it, and they added one more. It's called a liberty oppression. And this, now we think of like libertarian, right? Libertarian views and those kinds of things. So where does that fall in this? So they modified the fairness to make that fairness have more of a meaning of proportionality. And then they found that we have this group in the middle here. You can see them there, the libertarians. So the libertarians, he would say, would be like people on the left on some things, like people on the right in other ways. So they kind of come between on some of those. And this is his. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going to go ahead. No, should I embarrass everybody? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, how many of you live within a convenient distance of a Whole Foods store? Okay, he would say you're more likely to be a liberal. How many of you live within convenient distance of a Cracker Barrel? He would say if you're closer to a Cracker Barrel than a Whole Foods, you're probably a conservative. So some of the, like I say, some of the, okay, you're right, nice try. We just proved it's not true with our group right here. All right, so liberals are very strong in the care-harm piece. That trumps all the rest of them. Conservatives would be across the scale, kind of evenly divided along those, all six. And libertarians, as you can guess, would be more heavily into the liberty. That would be their strongest one, with some of the otherness, the fairness one picking up there. So he can describe how people get separated, and of course his reason why the Democrats lost a lot in the last election was because they only appealed to care-harm issues and not to any of the sanctity, the rest of these issues. They were one-dimensional. So his message to liberals is, hey, you have to look at these other ones if you're going to get people to vote for you. And now finally we get down to it. How do we overcome some of this labeling and the rest of it going on? Civility costs nothing but buys everything. So being civil as attorneys, we learn even though you can argue in court, you need to be civil about it because there's a lot of data out there that you know who wins the most cases? The party who has the most likable lawyer. Not the party that's the most likable to a jury, but the party who has the lawyer that's most likable to a jury. So you see on TV and in all these programs, you know, that their lawyers are always hammering things home. That's not real world. I'm just going to finish up with a couple things here. This is a quick, two different maps. You know, you look at this and you go like, one of the things is, I need to see both of those to really understand what I'm not. Who won, the Republicans or Democrats? You look at the one on the left, you go, well, obviously the Republicans won. It was a landslide victory. The one on the right shows proportionality, and you notice that the blue are the places with higher number of people in them, and the red are more rural places. So that probably tells a better story. So anytime we look at this data and we try to say, well, which is more accurate, I think the one on the right, which I have not seen until I was looking up some of these things, is probably a better prediction of how those things go. Now I'm going to talk about healthcare. I had a tough year in healthcare last year. Some of you know that. I'm very blessed. I had a lot of prayers answered, and although God didn't exactly answer my prayers the way I wanted them to in the timing that I thought was appropriate, I have to say that. So, but I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I'm feeling terrific, and I'm glad to be up here. And I had a bout with cancer, and I am now cancer-free. So I'm very, very happy with the health care we have here. And so I came up with this. What's the worth of health care? We Americans, especially in Minnesota, all have access to the best health care in the world. I truly believe that is true. I don't think it's kind of true. I think it's true. And I'd say we have the best health care in the history of the world right here. I was supposed to undergo this very bad surgery, which I don't want to talk about the details of. And it was the 7th colorectal surgeon that I went to who said, well, I think maybe I can do that a different way with a camera and a robot, so we don't have to slice you all up. I said, let's give that a shot. And it did. It worked. Who does surgery with a camera and a robot? Evidently just one guy in anywhere. So I was happy that I got to him. I'm very thankful to Concordia for our health care plan, which meant that the Mayo Clinic in Rochester was in network for me to get that done. And this goes to really something I think we think of not enough. We're Americans, privilege. Oh, who's privileged? You know what? We're in the United States, we're privileged to live here. I don't know where all my ancestors came from other places. As far as I know, none of my great-grandparents spoke English, okay? But they're here, and I got to be born here in Minnesota. So I didn't do anything to earn that, but I'm privileged to be here because we have the best health care. My wife Sarah and I went over to Vietnam a few years ago. Besides getting shots in every part of our body before we went, yeah, not a lot of fun. I don't want to go into detail on that. They told us, if you get sick or injured in Vietnam, what you should do is get on an airplane and fly out. And I said, well, where should they go? And they said, wherever the first airplane out takes you. I said, well, what if I'm bleeding? Well, try to stop the bleeding and get on an airplane and get out. Because they had so many cases where people went to the hospital and it wasn't cleanly enough and they died of other infections. And I'm going like, oh my goodness, my wife and I saw a car accident on the road. Nobody's coming for the guy. There's no ambulance. He's just dying right there. Watching him die, that was not too pleasant. So we take some of these things for granted, I think, in the United States. We really are privileged. And the 1%ers, who are the 1%ers? How many of you are in the top 1% income-wise in the Twin Cities? Probably not anybody. In Minnesota? Probably not anybody. In the United States? Probably not anybody. In the world? Probably everybody. Thank you. I got brave people in the back saying, no, I'm a 1%er. You could be working as a tour guide here on campus and be a 1%er if you take the entire world into account. So some of these things we take for granted that I think in the United States we're just so blessed to have. And we can argue and bicker and all of those kinds of things, but I think we need to put that a little bit in perspective. The rest of the world sees us in a different way. When I was in Chile, they said, where are you from? We said, America. And they said, no, Norte Americano. We're Americans in South America. Central America are Americans. You say you're Americans, you're not Americans. You're Norte Americanos. And then I thought about it, I thought, yeah, what other country in the world kind of claims that their country is the entire continent or two? Only us. So it really kind of struck me, okay, what am I? I'm a United States citizen. I'm not just an American. That would be claiming that I'm a citizen of every country in North and South and Central America. So those are some of the things we learned. Just finally, what can we do about this? David Woodard and I did training last month with Better Angels. They're a group, Concordia is a member of the group that puts that on, and we've been trained as moderators. If we want to have discussions between people that are self-described left, right, or conservative, and the moderator training was really interesting, and we learned all the trigger words for both sides and how to handle some of those moderations and try to get people talking again. And so I'm hoping that he and I can conduct one of those on campus here sometime in the near future and really get people talking about issues again, because I think really that's where we need to go. As a Christian university, I think that's something we owe all of our students and ourselves, and that is the ability to have free speech, but within that freedom, look at people as fellow citizens and maybe people that are humane humans and look more at what brings us together than what separates us, right? Because if we keep focusing on slicing and dicing and my community for everything, we can get down to a community of one if we go far enough on that. And I think that's not really that helpful. So I'll close kind of with a quote from a former president, Abraham Lincoln. The Civil War was coming to a close, his second inauguration. He wasn't long for the world here then. He pleaded with the nation to heal and restore civility. He told a divided America, with malice toward none, charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. I think we have some wounds that need binding. And I really hope we can do that. And so in conclusion, I'd just say, let's try to treat people fairly, even generously, more than fair, and with respect. And that'll go a long way. Thank you. Hey.
Let's give them another round of applause, please. Tom, for the 30 years of teaching and service to Concordia University, we thank you. For the programs, developments, and leadership you provided in vital areas that sustain the university, our existence here, we applaud you. And for the lives you've touched, saved, and changed, we salute you. And from what we learned tonight, for the 3 to 4 alumni family members, we celebrate you. May this plaque be a constant reminder of our appreciation of the time, efforts, and impact you've had as a professor, director, dean, and many more roles here. Hats off to you, Tom. Congratulations, and we truly appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you too.
I didn't think we needed to read the words, but it reflects just you being our speaker for this series and the date. So in honor of the Poehler family and all the other contributors, we salute you.
Thank you so much.
Now, before I close with prayer, I just want to announce that there will be a reception just out in the lounge area. So please stay and join us and have some dialogue with Tom. Maybe not too much, you might be tired, but I have a couple of comments myself, so you'll have a chance to have some exchange with him and the family. Please join me in prayer. Lord, we thank you for your wisdom and love in creating each and every one of us in your image. Continue to inspire us to seek ways to connect you to every aspect of our being and in all that we do. Thank you for witnesses like Tom and all of your clouds of witnesses. Give us the courage and strength to refrain from labeling and to treat people fairly, generously, and with respect. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.